Welcome, everyone. I'm Dana Peever, decision expert, author, speaker, and podcast host. You're listening to the Wildly Courageous Women podcast. More women than ever are faced with challenging decisions on a regular basis. I am so privileged to sit down with them to discuss exactly what they've gone through and how they've come out the other side, realizing their wildest dreams. I'm sure you'll be able to relate. And don't forget to stay to the end to take advantage of my latest free gift. Let's get started. Welcome to the Wildly Courageous Women podcast. I'm Dana Peever, decision expert, and as always, we're here talking about decisions that have been made in our lives that were courageous or impactful or changed the course of our life, or even one that maybe we wish we could go back on. So today I have Cara Dianne as my guest. I've known Cara for a few years now, and she's actually my social media manager. Thanks so much for joining me, Cara.
Happy to be here. Hello.
So before we get started, I want to remind listeners that I ask all my guests what their most favorite app is at the end of our call, outside of social media. So you'll want to stay to the end to see what Cara has to say, because we sure get some great suggestions. And again, you'll also want to stay to the end to get access to my latest freebie. So, Cara, we're going to take this step by step. I need you to set the stage for me as it relates to the decision that you've so graciously offered to share with us today. And for all our listeners out there, I have no idea which decision we're going to talk about today. So, Cara, to get started, can you tell us, about the background, how old you were, where you were living, were you in school, were you working? Just set the stage for us.
Okay, so I was 25 years old and I was pregnant with my daughter, and I was going to be going on to maternity leave. And prior to being a social media manager, working in the social media realm, I was also a paramedic. And I had to make a decision on if I wanted to keep my certifications or if I was going to dive into where I wanted to go. So that is some of the background. I was living with my husband, so we were living together. He was working out of town a lot, and there was also the need for me to be home a lot more based off of the things that he was doing. So we'll talk more about that, but that's the stage for the decision.
Okay. And were you dating, engaged, married at the time?
We were engaged.
Okay. And was it just the two of you at that point in your lives?
No. So it was myself and my husband, and then his two children from his previous marriage. So it was also my stepdaughter and my stepson.
Okay. And any pets?
Oh gosh. Yeah. We had 3 dogs at the time. That's it.
Okay. But to me, when I think of animals, like a pet is almost an additional child, in my opinion, based on, cats, maybe not so much. Maybe it takes 2 cats to equal 1 child, but you get the picture. I'm just trying to understand kind of where your head was at and what responsibilities you had at that point in time. So in terms of where you were living, were you in an apartment? Were you in a house? Were you renting? Did you own? What set that stage for me?
We lived in a house, and we were renting this house from my in-laws.
Oh, okay. Great. Yeah. Great. And it was in a town that you worked in?
Yes. Well, yes. I had originally, so a little backstory on that, I guess, which is relevant to it, is that I had worked in Moose Jaw for years. And then before I met my husband, I had moved back to Regina and started working with a company there. Then when I met my husband, there were some decisions that turned things around, and I was working in a medical clinic here. And then I was pregnant with my daughter, and that's when some certifications had come up. So I was working here, and I wasn't sure the direction that was going to go into.
Okay. So 2 more quick questions. Was your husband working local as well? So this where you were living was a good place for both of you to be situated?
So he works locally, but in the summer he works all over Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta.
Okay. And how long up until that point had you been a paramedic and had these certifications?
That would have been 5 years.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
So you were fairly young when you started
Yeah.
on that journey.
Very, yeah.
Okay. I think I think I've asked enough questions in terms of the background. All right. So then, what situation were you in then that kind of put you in a position where you had to make a decision? I know you mentioned you were pregnant, and that could have been the
Yeah.
catalyst. Is that what we're looking at here?
Most definitely. And also having two other children that I was also taking care of during the summer while my husband was gone. That was also a huge factor. Childcare, the expenses of childcare, putting not just two children, but three children and an infant into childcare. And it's expensive. So that was also a factor. And also a big one for myself, and I'd always wanted this since I was young, is I wanted to be a very present mom. And the career as paramedicine where I was living also required you to be away and do tours out of town. So that would mean I'd be away from my kids sometimes 5 days, 7 days at a time. And with a young one, I just wasn't, that didn't feel right to me.
It's really interesting. And, I've lived through similar circumstances where you just want to be present as a mom,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I don't know that everybody is afforded that opportunity,
No.
to be as present as they want. So it sounds like you were making some decisions that allowed you to consider
Mm-hmm.
how present you wanted to be.
Yes,
Kudos on you.
absolutely.
I think we all do that, but I'm really excited to hear where this goes. So, in terms of your mindset, how are you feeling about making this decision?
I was a mess.
Oh,
I did not feel confident in my decision making. I did not know what the right decision was. I felt very crippled by the decision. Just even the thought of having to look at the website, knowing that my certifications were up, caused me a lot of anxiety. And I had put it off for quite a long time. And to the point where I had gotten some of those certifications again, even though I wasn't pursuing said career anymore, because I had this attachment that it meant something about who I was, and
wow.
that I had identified with it for so long that
Mhm.
if I no longer had that, who was I? But also, was I letting down family? Was I letting down my husband? So there was a lot of factors I feel that had me feeling very crippled in making that decision.
Wow. So help me understand from a certification standpoint, was there a
Yeah.
cost associated with recertifying? Was there
Yes.
time commit? What did it take?
So there's a time commitment. There's also, it depends on if you're working at a company. So most of the time, if you're currently employed with a company that is paramedicine, is that they do those certifications and it's provided to you. Whereas if you're doing it on your own, and let's say you're not employed by somewhere, then that's your own expense.
Right.
And there are certain credits that the College of Paramedics requires every year for you to complete. And
Mhm.
so you have to then submit those certifications that those things have been complete. And if they're not, then your certifications basically, go into lapse. And you only have a certain amount of time before you have to almost repeat the entire program.
Wow.
So,
Okay. So it
yeah.
wasn't just a matter of getting your credit card out and paying to
No.
have your certification
No.
extended. There was a lot more to it. Okay.
Yeah.
I understand better now what you were going through in terms of the decision. So whose help did you enlist to help you work through your thoughts?
So I had first talked to my husband about it. And at that time, my husband was very free bird, I guess you would say, with it, where he's like, do what makes you happy. And I was like, I don't even know what that is right now. And then I also enlisted the help of my mom. I always go to my mom for everything.
As do I.
And and she has a very free spirited energy as well, like go to where you feel you're being pulled. But at that time I still wasn't clear, or I didn't have the confidence in myself on what that direction was, so I felt very conflicted. And I also, I guess, didn't want to make the wrong decision, is what came up there too. So I enlisted the help of my husband, my mom, and I had tried to also talk to my dad about it. And there was a little bit of hesitation on that because at the time, it's changed a lot now. He was very career focused. Like it was, you go to post secondary, you get a career, you get benefits, you move forward. So having that conversation with him then was a little different than how it is now. And so, yeah, it was mainly my mom and my husband.
Okay. And perhaps had your parents maybe helped pay for the education to get you to be a paramedic, or had that been on your own?
So my father and my stepmother had helped pay for it. I actually went to university prior to that as well, and so they had helped with that. But the paramedicine was mine, was
Okay.
me, all me.
Okay. Just wondering if he had any attachment to,
Yeah.
the fact that it was something that he had contributed to. All right. So did you have a plan to help you make this decision? Like, what did you have a system? What steps did you go through?
I didn't even really have a system. I basically feel like flew by the seat of my pants, to be quite honest with you on that one. When I look back at it, I was so hard on myself. And, we grow through, what we go through, and we learn from previous decisions. And I feel like I very much learned from that one. And I knew at the time that I had the desire to stay home.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also very interested in the coaching industry, simply from growing up with a mom who had been inside of the coaching industry for since I was very, very young.
Right.
So it was a big inspiration to me to be a part of that. And I was very nervous about making that change because at the time when I had started that, there was people really didn't fully understand entrepreneurship either. Or if you started it, the question was, well, why are you doing that?
Right.
Why would you do that?
Right.
So there was a lot of fear of judgment. Um, I feel like I'm losing the train of where I was going with that. So can you
Yeah,
bring that
absolutely.
full circle? Because I was like,
Yeah,
I
we
don't
were
want to
just
go on
talking
a
about
whole other train.
yeah, we were talking about, do you have any system? Did you have any, thought process that you were
Got it.
going through? And then, you suggested that there were things that were standing in the way of you potentially following the path that you were considering. So what
Yes.
happened next? Like what did you mentioned that you talked to your mom and your husband and your
Yeah.
dad a little bit. What ultimately wound up happening?
So I actually ended up coming across someone I had gone to high school with, and she was in the coaching industry.
Mhm.
And the content that I was seeing from her, I was resonating very much so. And so I had reached out to her to have a call. And I felt like at the time I needed a very outward perspective, somebody that wasn't potentially someone close
Mhm.
to me.
Mhm.
And so I hopped on a coaching call and I had hired my first coach. And honestly, that was the catalyst to me making the decision to no longer be a paramedic. And it's so, when I look back at it, it was so quick. Like when it came to that decision about hiring my first coach and investing into those things, it was like subconsciously I knew what decision I was going to make already. And I knew that I wanted to go into that industry. So I made the decision to hire a coach that then almost anchored in the decision that I wanted to leave paramedicine. And
Wow.
so I feel like that was kind of like the catalyst to that decision.
Great, great. And how did you feel after you made the decision?
Oh, I felt extremely empowered, not only because there was a good investment that was behind it,
Mhm.
but I also felt like I was doing something for myself and it wasn't for anybody else. And at the time, because that the feelings and the emotions that I had held on to the decision of leaving paramedicine were so strong that
Mhm.
the decision to invest into the coaching industry and have my first mentor was was very easy, which is like when even talking about it, when I look back, that was very easy. So I feel like that was just also another sign to me that that was the direction I was supposed to take. That's where I was meant to go.
Okay. Okay. So you made that decision and that's what you've been pursuing ever since.
So I started with the coaching, yeah, and I was doing mindset coaching, and then it really evolved into co-parenting. So I did a lot of uh, coaching when it came to co-parenting, just due to our dynamics in our home.
Mhm.
And then from there, because that work was very heavy and we were going through some additional tough decisions, I pulled back from social media for a while and really had to think about what actually brought me joy. What was I doing? What was I creating? What was I doing for other people or the clients that I was working with that really brought me a lot of joy? And it actually ended up coming full circle to doing digital marketing, social media management, and still being able to have calls with clients, connect with clients, create content, but not from a space of like, I have to, but because I want to. So
Right.
it's really kind of cool how that evolution happened. But I
Mhm.
feel like the coaching industry and the certifications that I got through that, it really allowed me to feel like I could make clear decisions, if that makes sense. I still struggle with them though, don't get me wrong. But
Well, that's why we're
um
talking, right? No.
yeah. Yeah.
Great. So, when you look back, why do you think it was such a pivotal time for you?
Feel like because I was becoming a new person. So not only was I bringing life into this world, which called a whole new level of woman,
Hmm.
um, that there was a part of my life, there was really great memories there. And I couldn't decipher, like, I could keep those memories and those could stay with me. I had this thought that if I walked away from it, that all of those things would be gone. And I was so concerned. I was so wrapped up in what other people thought of me based off of that decision that I think left me very crippled in making it.
Hmm.
And now I make decisions based off of where I want to go and how that leads my family versus what other people think of me.
It's really interesting, Kara, because as I sit here listening to you, I feel your evolution as a wildly courageous woman. Like when you look back,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned that you didn't have that confidence and you were worried about what other people thought or felt about the decision you were making.
Yeah.
And I think in that moment, I hear that you ultimately made a decision and you knew deep down you needed to make a decision that was the best for you,
Yeah.
but you were also still taking so many other people's opinions into
Mm-hmm.
account in making that decision, right?
Well, I was, and I also didn't want to negatively impact the finances inside of our home at that time too. And that was a big factor. And I still remember my husband saying, we're okay, we're fine, we've got this. Like, you need to make whatever decision you feel is best. And so I had a lot of support from him.
Mm-hmm.
I also, growing up, um, I guess I never really identified with like the blue and pink roles, right? And so I always wanted to be able to provide for my family financially,
Right.
not just by my presence. And so that was very important to me. So I felt like when I made that decision to leave paramedicine, it did affect the income that came into the home for a
Right.
while.
Right.
Um, and so and that I felt like that meant something about what I could do for our family too. So I think that was a big factor as well.
Wow. Almost like the value that you bring. It's
Mm-hmm.
amazing, eh?
Yes,
What we hang our hats on in terms of
absolutely.
whew, whew.
Mm-hmm.
So how many years ago was that decision?
That would have been 6 years ago.
Okay.
I'm only,
So
I'm still a baby.
you are still a baby. Um, so how do you feel now about having made that decision and the impact and where
Oh,
it's brought you?
it was exactly the right decision that I needed to make. That career is definitely for, I felt like it was wonderful when I was single. I had made great money, I was helping people, I had always this desire to do more in this world. And so it was great. It was very fulfilling at the time, but it was also very physically, mentally, emotionally draining. And as I was starting to get older and wanted to have a family, the impact of calls that had to do with young families and children, it would have just started to hit home a lot differently. And there was a lot of other situations that impacted it, certain calls that we had gone on to and things that you'll never forget. It's the people who continue to be inside of that career in our paramedics. I give them like they what they do is very tough. And I personally don't think I mentally could have handled it for many more years.
Interesting.
And I know that that career can be very damaging to a lot of people. And so I feel like I left at the right time and for the right reasons. And but it was a wonderful experience while it lasted.
Right, because at the time, right, when you got into that industry, you had no idea what your future potential would be with a partner or kids or anything, right?
Yep.
You're making a decision based on where you are in that moment.
Yep.
And I think, some people look back and feel like those might have been poor decisions, but
Mm-hmm.
in reality, you're making a decision that's best for you in that moment, right? And
Yep.
you're taking into account everything that but there's still so much that's unknown.
Mhm.
So people are hard on themselves saying, oh, I should have never gone into that profession or what have you. But at the same time, how are you going to know? Right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I feel like that career, I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about human behavior, and I learned a lot about the things that I would tolerate or that I wouldn't. That career
Right.
also encourages you to set some very strong boundaries. And so I feel like there was a lot of benefits to it, and it definitely helped shape who I was. And it left an impact. I met some really great people. So
Good.
it still has an impact. I still talk to some of the people that I worked with then. So
Great. Great. So, as we look at the process that you went through, I can only, sit here and kind of map what you did against the system that I use. And
mhm.
you did a really good job with what you had.
Yeah.
You knew what decision you needed to make. You had identified your options. You really took into consideration all the factors that were
hmm
in front of you. Now, maybe with a conversation, we might have uncovered a few more factors at that point in time
Yeah.
that might have been impactful. And I feel like you started to kind of weigh how important those factors were to you.
Yeah.
um I think as we look at the system that I implement with all my clients, doing that mathematically and knowing that you have a mathematical score and a percentage that is on paper that
Yeah.
matches your intuition because you already knew what you were
Yes.
supposed to do,
Yeah.
but you just kind of need that validation. And
hmm
as we walk through the work that I do, I wish I'd been around for you 6 years ago.
I wish you were around then too.
Right, because how long do you think it took you to make that decision overall?
Definitely a year.
Huh, huh. Okay, so
I'm not kidding. It was a long, there was months where I would look at it. There was months where I took it back. I looked at it, I cried. It was at least a year.
and I'm sure you felt the weight of that decision for that entire year, didn't you? Oh,
Absolutely, I did. Yeah.
a year. So, and I get that some decisions take longer than others to make. I get it.
Yeah.
Um, but next time, come and see me because I'll truncate that for you, okay? And
Yeah,
I'll take
right.
some of that pain away for sure, for sure. Well, Cara, I'm so thrilled that you made such an informed decision and that it's worked out well for you. If you had to give advice to anybody else in a similar situation, what would you share?
I would share to trust yourself, because ultimately I feel like like I feel like if you just lean in a little bit, the answer is there, even when it feels scary, because sometimes it really is. But I
Mhm.
also feel the scary feeling, that fear is based off of the unknown, because we don't know what's going to happen next.
Right.
And so my advice would be to lean in and to trust yourself and to take risks,
Yeah.
because sometimes you really reap the rewards from those things.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I hear you, and I think that's advice that many people hear,
hmm
but unlike you, I don't know if everybody is as brave as you were to trust your own intuition. So
I don't
kudos
know
on
at the
you.
time if sorry, I was like, I didn't even know if I felt like I was brave enough to trust myself, but I did.
And I hear that a lot too. People who are brave don't consider themselves brave or
Yeah.
courageous. So I'm calling it a spade a spade. You were brave and courageous in that moment, and I applaud you for that. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. You're welcome. All right. So I appreciate, really kind of the juxtaposition of your life, right? Because you did
Mhm.
almost an about face from being um, go, 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 externally dealing with, you know, mostly traumatic situations and that kind
Yeah.
of thing, to still helping people, but in a very different
hmm
capacity and being able to be present as a mom like you wanted
Yes.
to be.
Yep.
So good on you for that.
Thank you.
I'm glad that you had the opportunity to make that decision for yourself. All right. So, Cara, we're coming to the end. I can't believe the time has gone so quickly. So, my one final question for you as we wrap things up. I've asked what your favorite app is on your phone outside of social media. And I make a joke every time. I say, everybody already should have the Decision Smith app on their phone too. So, you can't say that because that goes without saying. So, what is short of social media and the Decision Smith app, what is your next favorite app?
The I Am app. So that is a positive affirmation app.
Okay.
And so every day it will send you a reminder of an affirmation that might be relevant to the day. You might look at it and say, wow, I didn't even think I needed that. And so, for example, I pulled it up as we were talking because I knew the question was coming up. And Perfect. it just comes in the background and it's got a quote. And this one says, I trust that everything in my life is happening for a reason. And so it's just a really nice little reminder, and it pops up on my phone, and the I Am app comes on and it tells me that my affirmation is there. And so that's one of my favorite apps.
It feels very grounding.
Mm-hmm. It very much so is.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Cara, I want to thank you so much for sharing your time with me today and your stories. And to all of our listeners out there, thanks for joining us. If you're ready to realize your wildest dreams, come and join us in the Wildly Courageous Women Facebook group, where we're changing people's lives one brave decision at a time. I'm Dana Peever, and until next time, make great decisions and do life fun. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Wildly Courageous Women. Keep listening to hear more stories of these incredible women realizing their wildest dreams. If you have a story to tell about a decision that you've made that has impacted your life, I'd love to feature you as a guest. Please get in touch, and don't forget to grab my latest gift by clicking below. I'm Dana Peever. As always, make great decisions and do life fun.